we've heard some good arguments from both sides on this issue, but I have to be honest. The party don't start until I walk in. And now that I'm here, everything has changed. Enough with the stupid lines. Let's look at the interp of the opposition team of the resolution. Sorry, guys. Basically, what they've interpreted this resolution as dead in every way. They took a quote, a piece of rhetoric from my partner, and used it to explain logic, as this is what the resolution means, but seemed to miss what exactly the metaphor was talking about. Now, when we have a metaphor resolution, it's exactly that, a metaphor. It's not literal, as in, well, we have to shoot every album of the Beatles and throw them in the ground and then have some sort of a funeral over them. So, I'm going to give you the case that the opposition interpretation of the resolution is basically worthless. We have a number of points of contention to look at these. There are three burdens they presented. First, that it can't be coming back. Second, physical death, which I don't see how this relates to music. Third, legacy. I will take your point of information.
Spencer, I just want to congratulate you on making it to the exhibition round, first of all. The one question I want to ask is, could I get the tagline, the exact tagline of your third contention one more time?
The third contention? Yes, the rhetoric of his third contention is titled that Paul McCartney is dead in every way. So we look at these three standards and we show why this doesn't fit the interpretation of the metaphor. Now I have a standard for this. Reasonable interpretation. Reasonable interpretation. What does that necessarily mean? Well, he says not coming back. What we've done is we've taken this metaphor and applied it to music. What do we mean when we say music has died, or a certain style of music has died? Well, that can't necessarily mean that that music is never coming back, because that's never finite. Someone could always find an old record of an Egyptian song that was played for the pharaoh somewhere in the pyramids somewhere and bring that music back. Now let's look at the next standard of physical. Obviously this has nothing to do with the airwaves and the sound that are projected through the different mediums in our world. The third, legacy. I want to demonstrate how dead people can even have a legacy. But what do we mean when we're talking about that a style of music is dead? We've interpreted the resolution, Paul McCartney is dead, to say that his style of music, classical rock, or classic rock, classical music is a different type of style, classic rock is dead, and basically it's not the trend anymore. And we had two specific reasons to show that this is true, or two contentions, two types of things to recognize when a style of music is dead. The first is popularity, and popularity as it is today. The second is production, or what music is being produced today. I'll take your point of information.
Are you saying just because something's not trending means it's dead?
A style of music, if it hasn't been trending for the past whatever number of years, we're seeing a trend in the trending of music, meaning that style of music is dead. Sorry if that's a little circular and a little bit up there.
It was a little up there.
Yes, okay. Metaphysical music. So let's look at some of the examples that my opponent brought up in just a second. A number of examples talked about a number of bands that he says have been influenced by the Beatles in some way. We looked at Fall Out Boy, we looked at a number of bands like One Direction. Well, I have one point in response to this argument: dead people have legacy. Dead people can still have an effect. I'll take your point.
Yes. Is it true that a trend of music that dies out can resurface again in the future?
It could. Sit down. Classic rock. Can someone name for me the last classic rock album that was produced in the past 20 years?
Whatever the newest Foo Fighters release was.
How many people listen to the Foo Fighters? Show of hands. Great. So, the smallest minority of the room that I could possibly imagine, unless it was just Benji himself. But when we say Ronald Reagan is dead, that doesn't necessarily mean that we forget Ronald Reagan or that his ideas are never coming back. That just means that Ronald Reagan is no longer in control of the United States. Just like the Beatles are no longer in control of the music industry. Benji, minority, what will you say?
So you're saying I'm a minority because I listen to the Foo Fighters. So if I'm a minority because I'm not as trendy and I listen to a band that's not as popular, does that mean I'm dead?
No. That doesn't mean you're dead. It just means that that specific trend of music is dead. You see, the fact is, I would rather be singing in the shower than living on a yellow submarine.
Overruled!
You know what? I want another opportunity. Go ahead.
Okay. When you say that something that dies can be resurfaced later, it really sounds like the music might not have actually died. It might have just evolved into something else.
Might have just evolved?
Yes.
Did you know that evolution, if I could actually have a lecture on biology, evolution is a process that happens throughout the centuries when species, through natural selection, pass down their DNA. First, the old type has to die before the next type can evolve. So evolution implies death, good sir. Not at this time. Let's look at the two contentions. The third one is really just the conclusion. The first contention was that classic rock has fallen from glory. What we've seen is, again, all we can name is the Foo Fighters to give any example of this type of music. Who's at the top of the charts? Well, Shower. It's a great song. You should listen to it, Benji.
It's actually not at the top of the chart.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's pretty high up there, man. Imagine Dragons. Can we get a knock for that? Yes, sir. Imagine Dragons is a type of music that uses something completely different from what the Beatles had. If you notice, they use electronic instruments, something that the Beatles never used. Beatles used classic instruments. They used guitars, strings. Now, there may have been some sort of electronic type brought into there a little bit later. I see your incredulous face. But dubstep is evidence that the Beatles have moved on. You see, the Beatles are no longer listened to. They are listened to in a sense. We listen to them, but the Beatles are no longer listened to completely as the Beatles. The evidence that we have so many remixes of the Beatles in dubstep or electronica shows that we've had something completely new. You've already asked one. I want to see this. Yes,
Okay.
yes, you.
You want to hear my question?
I would love to hear your question.
Okay. Would you agree with me that Paul McCartney invented screamo because one of his producers wrote an album and
Caller.
Sorry?
You would agree with me that Paul McCartney actually invented screamo because his producer wrote an album and octave too high for him? Yes.
That would be a terrible thing, but yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I would never want to hear Paul McCartney screamo. I can see Ryan's incredulous face. But as we've seen in this round, we have a metaphor, okay? The metaphor is that Paul McCartney is dead. What is this a metaphor for? That the style of music, classic rock, is no longer in fashion. That style is not the style of music today. Whether that be for good or for ill, that is not our burden today. Our burden is to prove that something is a fact, that something is no longer that state as it is. Can a dead person have a legacy? Can a dead person affect other people? Well, yes, they can, and I hope so. I hope that when I'm gone, my children will remember me. And maybe you'll remember this terrible round, even though it's gone. But anything that's dead will affect other things. But we've shown two standards, two proofs when a style of music is dead. Neither of these have been knocked down. The first is the popularity. What is at the top of the charts? The Beatles do not remain there. What's played most often on the radio? That's not the Beatles. That's not Paul McCartney. That's not classic rock. Not at this time, I'm sorry. The point of order.
We're over a minute and 20 seconds over time.
Are you timing?
Yes.
I was not getting any signals.
Will you
Or
self-timing?
self-timing.
What? Oh,
So you want self-timing?
That's okay. No big deal. Just wrap it up.
all right.
Get wrecked.
The second is the production of music. Is classic rock being made today? Well, the clear and obvious fact is that it's not. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.